Welcome back to these lectures in the Principles of Macroeconomics. This lecture is going to be a supplement to the Topic 10 lecture about establishing equilibriums, and we're going to dive into it a little bit more and talk about establishing new equilibriums if the supply-or-demand curve shifts to a new position. Because one of the variables other than price has changed, shifting the whole demand curve, changing the demand, or shifting the whole supply curve, changing the supply. So just to review a little bit, the shift variables, there are actually 6 variables that determine quantity demanded, but the 5 that will shift the demand curve are change in other prices, in particular a change in the price of substitutes or a change in the price of complements, okay? And depending upon the nature of the change, it might shift the demand curve to the right, increasing it, or to the left, decreasing it. A change in taste and preferences, which, again, depending upon the nature of the change, pro or con, could increase or decrease the demand. A change in income, and depending upon the nature of the good under consideration, could increase the demand or decrease it. It would increase it if it were a normal good and decrease it if it were inferior good. And for a change in the number of people in the market, so if the number of people in the market increased, the prices would go up. If the number of people in the market decreased, the demand curve would decrease and shift to the left. A change in expected price or availability of the good in the future. So if consumers expect the price to increase in the future, they would increase the quantity demanded at each and every price now. This often trips students up, but we are talking about expected prices in the future. All right, let's now quickly review supply. And for the supply curve, we had 8 variables determining quantity supplied. 7 of them would cause shifts in the supply curve. The shift would, these variables would cause the shifts. A change in the cost of inputs used in the production of the good or service, energy, labor, raw material, etc. If they increased in price, the supply curve would shift to the left. If they decreased in price, it would shift to the right. A change or improvement in technology would typically shift the supply curve to the right. You rarely get a change that's not an improvement, that actually is a backward step technologically speaking, even though it might seem like a step forward. Typically, this occurs when the government thinks it's best to use some sort of technology which cannot cover its cost because it's not very efficient, and subsidizes that good. So if you include the subsidies, the price typically does increase. Supply curve shifts to the left. The change in governmental actions, laws, regulation, taxes, subsidies. Their taxes and subsidies, I think, are self-explanatory. Higher taxes on an activity, shift it to the left. Lower taxes to the right. Higher subsidies, shift it to the right. Lower subsidies or no subsidies to the left. Regulations increase cost, shifting it to the left. Laws, much the same. Natural events, typically, most of these are bad and shift the production of goods to the left. Though certainly I should have put a good one in. I don't see any good natural event in here, great growing weather, plenty of sunshine, plenty of rain at just the right time. Crops, we have record crops, so that would shift it to the right. Number 5, changes in expected price of the good or inputs that produce it. So, if the producer thought prices were going to increase in the future, well, they would hold production off the market until they increased. So that would shift it to the left. They would decrease the amount available. And if they thought the price was going to drop, they'd try to dump as much on the market now to get the current price as they could. Of course, that would shift the supply curve to the right. The number of firms that can produce a good, so the number of firms who enter the market and compete, that would shift the supply curve to the right. And by the way, the number of firms, if the number of firms are bankrupt and left, that would shift the supply curve to the left. Changes in the price of substitutes in production. So if a price and a substitute in production went up, that would shift the supply curve to the left of this good. But if it went down, it would shift it to the right. Okay, so you have to follow each of these through and be pretty flexible and innovative in following them. So here I've drawn a sort of a matrix, a table 3 by 3, but really it's the 4 basic tables, which I've sketched in supply and demand curves. So in this first one, where we have an increase in demand, you can see it here, we move from an equilibrium price here to an equilibrium price here, okay? So we move from A to B. And you can see in so doing that prices go up and quantity increases. So an increase in demand will typically push prices up, and it will also push the equilibrium quantity produced and consumed up. But a decrease in demand will do the opposite. So you see these are move in the same direction. That's because the supply curve is sloping upward to the right. It's a direct relationship. There's a movement along the supply curve. And if there's a decrease in demand, we're going to see that prices decrease and the equilibrium quantities decrease too. We move down here. There's a movement along the supply curve to there. And in this one, we have an increase in supply. We have a movement along the demand curve. The demand curve is negatively sloped. So what we're going to see here is a decrease in price and an increase in the equilibrium quantity. And here with the decrease in supply and a move along the demand curve, prices will be pushed up and equilibrium quantity, whoops, I meant to put an arrow up, and equilibrium quantity down, okay? And basically, this will be the case even if both curves shift at the same time. Whichever curve shifts more it will be as if only it shifted as far as which way equilibrium price and quantity move. They could move by exactly the same amounts, in which case we'll either get an increase in quantity but no change in price, or an increase in price and no change in equilibrium quantity. And then I go through the 4 showing, that this demand curve shifts out, creating a shortage. We move to equilibrium. The demand curve shifts in, a decrease in demand, creating a surplus, and we move down to equilibrium. The supply curve moves out, creating a surplus at the old price, and we move to the new equilibrium. Whoops. I don't need that one. Let's delete that slide. Okay. So in this one, the supply curve shifts to the left, creating a shortage, and we move to a new equilibrium. So this should help you do homework number 2. All right. Now on to topic 11.